When I first started mixing music, I really had very little idea what I was doing. Over the years, I've learned a lot of stuff. And I wanted to talk about the 5 things I wish I had known about mixing low end when I first started recording. So the first thing that I want to talk about is pretty much the most critical thing that I'm going to talk about, okay? And that is how much the room and the space that I am mixing in affects the way that I hear and perceive the low end coming out of my monitors, okay? So this, I'm going to try to keep this brief, but one of the things I have learned is that using smaller monitors, something like the IK Multimedia Micro monitors, which I love, using those in my space has really opened my eyes up to the problems that my space has. Now, one of the things about using smaller speakers is that they physically move less air, which in a sense, to a slight degree, to a large degree, in the case of the iLoud micro monitors, they are removing the room from the equation to a degree, right? Of course, they're not removing it completely because you're always going to be sitting in your room. But because of the fact that they move less air means that the impact of it, several feet away from the monitors is nothing really to consider. Whereas my big monitors, my 8-inch monitors, the low end, they move so much air that the room really becomes a problem instead of, not. So that's, I want to keep it short, but I do want you to comprehend that acoustic treatment, like the foam panels, really only do high end. You're looking for bass traps, specifically if you're trying to control low end in your space, right? Bass traps are heavy. Bass traps are very, very dense. But what they do to your room is pretty powerful if you have problems. So if you're someone who your monitors are right up against the wall, that's a number one problem. If you're in a corner for some reason, if you're in a corner and your monitors are, on each like left wall and right wall, and then they're coming out of the corner, that's going to be a mixing problem. If your monitors are sitting inside of a shelf, or if they have some sort of shelf right on top of them, that's going to be a huge nightmare for mixing. The reflections that come out of like a shelf or something. And I know a couple of you have sent pictures. Paolo, I'm specifically thinking of you. I saw that picture of your studio, which looks great, but the location of the monitors really made me like, oh no. I bet that has a lot to do with why the low end is getting mixed not perfectly. So just understand that the space, if you keep listening to your mixes in your car or wherever, and the low end is the number one problem, then you probably want to look at treating your room, or at very least moving your monitors. And at the top of the resolve it problem would be buying something like the iLoud micro monitors from IK Multimedia. Okay. So the second thing that I really wish I had known, and this is going to be specifically about bass guitar. When I'm playing bass, consistency of volume amongst the notes is critical. Okay. Now I'm a guitar player and a bass player. I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I play lots of different instruments, right? But my bass playing hasn't always been very good. And something I've learned over the years of recording here in my studio for myself or for clients has been to keep the volume consistent as much as possible throughout the entire take, right? A little lift where it's needed in the choruses, for example, and then to bring it back down in the verses is always nice. But in general, like if I'm switching note to note to note, I want them all to be the same volume. Now, when it comes time to mixing those individual notes, and compressing it, all that kind of stuff. Now, this is something you probably have all experienced. You're going along and the track sounds great, but you hit that one note on the bass and it kind of just falls out. It disappears in the mix. Now, one of the things that can resolve this for you is shaving off a ton of the low end, which is kind of surprising, but a lot of that mud below 100 hertz is really going to start hurting you. Now, again, 100 hertz is my personal rule, my personal number, but that's where I'm working, my instruments that I'm using. But in general, I have found that nothing below 100 hertz thing for regular like rock and folk rock and stuff like that, in general, that's a pretty decent rule to follow. Again, this isn't written in stone, but it is something you can keep in mind as you're mixing. Now, again, below 100 hertz, and then the other area is the 200 hertz area. That's always like a low mid scoop for me, but something that cleans up a lot of the mud. Now, again, if you still have that one note that is disappearing in the song, right? You can go in, use the visual EQ in GarageBand or whatever DAW you're using, and visually identify that note in the spectrum of sound waves, right? It should be very, very clear. Each note lives in a certain frequency range, and as you hit it on the bass, you'll see that boom, you'll see that curve in the EQ jump up. And so what you're looking for is that one note that's disappearing, and you might need to bring that one specific note up. On the other end of that, if you have one bass note that's too loud, do the same thing. Use the visual EQ, turn the analyzer on, look for that one note, and then just notch it out. You want to make that bass performance nice and even and smooth, okay? So that is resolving that one note issue and bass parts. Now, I'm going to sort of continue on with that 100 hertz conversation. This is going to bleed more into the mastering conversation, which I know a lot of you are always dealing with. A lot of us out there still dealing with mastering issues, myself included at times. So 100 hertz is pretty much where I just go to right at the beginning of all my mastering projects. I'll just do it because I know that low end, especially out of my instruments and out of my mixes, that's usually garbage. It's not stuff that I really, really need to contain and make sure that everybody, you got to hear all this these sub frequencies that are really going to just shake your roof off. I'm not going to do that with a regular rock song. It's not needed. That's not where the real guts of a rock song are, in my opinion. So if you're in the mastering realm, 100 hertz is going to be, let's use this as an example, but I'm going to say 100 hertz is going to be where you want that high shelf cutting off, right around 100 hertz, okay? Now we're also going to continue on to the 200 hertz conversation in mastering. I say this a lot in my videos. If you haven't watched all my videos about mastering, there are a ton of them, so make sure you do check them out. But in mastering, me personally, and a lot of guys out there, you'll hear a lot of engineers talking about 200 hertz as the area to investigate if your mixes in the mastering process have a lot of mud, a lot of like garble stuff going on in the low end, okay? So 200 hertz is pretty much always, for me at least, and I hate saying always, but really almost always going to be my problem area for that specific issue of this muddiness in the low end. One of the things that I have also realized about low end, and is we can maybe go back to the bass thing, is how much high end is needed. Actually, let's save that for number 5. So did we finish 200 hertz? I think we covered it. 200 hertz, just investigate it there if you have a lot of mud. The 5th and final thing that I wish I had known about mixing low end is how much high end is really required, how much high end and how many mids are required for properly mixing a regular old electric bass guitar tone. That is where the finger sound lives. That's where the attack of the finger or the pick, those mids and those high ranges, that is where those tones live. That punch that connects with a kick drum, that's where it lives. If you listen to your mixes on your iPhone and you're like, oh man, there's no bass in it, like where's all the bass? It's probably because you've scooped out all the high end and all the mids too much, so there's just nothing there for smaller speakers in particular to convey. If everything you're giving that tiny little speaker in your iPhone or whatever is just below 50, let's say 50 hertz, or let's say below 100 hertz, right? If it's all that, then you're not going to hear it on your phone, plain and simple. The 6th thing, I'm going to add number 6. The 6th thing I wish I had known about mixing is, again, we're going to go back to monitors and how important proper monitoring is. And the mix cubes from Avantone, something I've made reviews on, the meat and potatoes review. I'm sure you guys remember the guy. He was a Grammy winner, you guys, so get off of his meat and potatoes. He said it 1,000 times, I know, but that's because that is exactly true. It is what those monitors do. It lets you hear the real issues of your mixes. The funny thing is that they're not beautiful sounding monitors, but if you spend enough time with them, you really start understanding how powerful they are and truly what they do for you. When I first turned them on and plugged them in, I was like, what's the big deal here? Year after year, I'm like, man, I could not live without these monitors. They translate so much interesting mid-frequency information that it always helps my low end. So monitoring, and of course the space, that was the number one issue. But smaller monitors don't have as big of an issue in a small space. Remember that. But if you do have your stuff in bookshelves, that's going to play a big role. I think what I want to tell you is that monitoring is going to be key and your space is going to be key. There's a few specific frequency ranges you want to look at, and that's sort of the entire gist of this whole video, which I hope you're getting something out of. Low end is a real challenge for a lot of us, and I can't stress enough, and we talk about it all the time here on the internet, us, YouTube engineers. You must reference other mixes if you haven't figured this problem out. Once you do figure this problem out, it is a breeze. Once you're like, okay, this is the way my room works, my monitors, my playing, all this stuff. Once you figure out that formula, dude, it just becomes so much easier to mix low end. Like literally, I don't ever, my Monday music videos, I never take them out of here before I put them on the internet. And I just sort of fingers crossed that there's not too much low end. Now I do that through knowing my room, knowing my monitors, knowing my headphones that I use to reference for low end, right? Which are these guys right here. These are my CAD MH510s. Nice pair of headphones, but super heavy not super heavy, but they have a bunch of low end in it. And if there's too much low end, these headphones are absolutely going to tell me. But that's a different conversation, headphones and low end. Figure out what works for you and figure out which piece of equipment is doing what, right? So like I was saying before, the M Audio BX5As, my big 8-inch monitors, I only turn them on now to reference low end and extra high end. But for the most part, I'm on my micro monitors, the iLouds. Honestly, they are so good. And I can't stress that enough. Maybe I should have made this video when it was still Black Friday and all that, but Christmas is coming up, so great thing to ask for Christmas. I am going to leave an Amazon link below for those monitors because they're phenomenally good, you guys. Watch all the reviews out there. Tons of professionals like myself are using them, and Recording Magazine just had an awesome article and a review about them, talking specifically about what I was talking about earlier, about the fact that they'd sort of remove the room from the equation to a slight degree. They're great monitors, and if you're working in a small, untreated space, and you're on a budget, they're the best monitors, in my opinion, for you to be using. They're super versatile and blah, 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 blah. This isn't a review for micro monitors, but they're awesome. So you guys, I hope you got something out of this video. I really do enjoy making these videos for you guys here on Garageband and beyond. There are hundreds and hundreds of videos about mixing, recording tutorials and mastering tutorials and equipment reviews, guitar reviews, regular stuff on how to be a professional musician, all sorts of fun stuff over here. Hours and hours of material for your entertainment to watch and hopefully you learn, because that's really the goal here. I'm loving teaching you guys and I hope you enjoy learning from me. So have a wonderful day. Please hit that subscription button and the little notification bell if you'd like to know when my videos come out. And that's it. All right. Have an awesome day, you guys. And I'll see you on Monday with a brand new song. Peace.